Hello and welcome to part 3 of my GitX series. In part 1 and part 2, I went over state management and a little bit of dependency injection. And in part 3, I want to focus more on the route management aspect of GitX. So I created a new screen from part 2. This is kind of like a navigation hub where we can test out different aspects of the navigation. Right now, these buttons don't do anything. So I've added this section to the sidebar here so we can see state management and we can see navigation. So you can see this is from part 1 and part 2 here. So let's go down to our main, and the first thing I want to do is I want to change our material app to a Git material app. So this is a wrapper from the GitX library that has a lot more functionality than the normal material app. So like if you go inside here, then you can see that we have a few other options that are not in the material app, but most of these are the same as the material app. So we have our Git material app now, and down here we define our routes for part 1 and part 2. I want to create a new section called Git pages. So that's part of the GitX library. So we have Git pages, and we can define separate Git page widgets. So Git page is how you would define a route that's specific to the GitX library. Okay, so you would do something like this, and you would define a name for it. So for the name, I created a new widget up here, or a new screen, I mean, and I put that in the navigation folder. So we have something called a navigation hub. So that's this screen here. So you can see our 11 buttons here, and right now they don't do anything when you press the button. Okay, so let's go back to our main, and in the main, I want to define our new screen up here. So we have navigation hub. So I'm just going to name it the same, navigation underscore hub. And then you define the actual page where it goes to. So there's a page element here, and you just point to the actual page. So I want it to go to navigation hub. So a very similar syntax to up here, but now you don't actually need the context, which is pretty nice. So now we have our first Git page here. And now I'm actually going to take this out since we're not using this anymore. So let's delete this, save. And now let's go back to our side drawer where we're actually going to the screen. So instead of the navigator.pushNamed that we're all familiar with, let's change this to Git. So first you do Git, and make sure you import the right one. You want to import the route manager Git. And then we could say dot to named. So we're going to create a named route here, and we called it navigation hub. Okay, I want to check that one more time to make sure. Navigation hub. Okay, so now save this and restart. And if we go back to our side drawer and click on this, we go back to the screen here. And if you don't want to use named routes, you can just say dot to and just pass in the actual screen itself, navigation hub. But we're going to do named for this screen here. Okay, so now let's go to the navigation hub screen. So before we add code to the screen here, I want to actually create a new screen, and I'm going to call it navigation, let's call it navigation test. And we're going to create a stateless widget. So let's do stateless widget navigation test. Okay, let's import material. And now we're going to create our scaffold like we normally do. So scaffold, we can add our app bar here. So for app bar, let's do app bar title. And for title, let's just call it navigation, actually text, navigation test. Okay, and for the body, I want that to be a container with a child that is a centered, so center. And for this, I want to have a child that's a column. So let's do column. For the children, first I want to have a large text here. So I want to say text. And for the text here, I want it to say navigation test. Let's make the text really big. So let's do style, text style. And for the text style, let's do font size 32. Okay, and under here, I want to actually put a sized box because I want some spacing. And for the height, let's do 16. And under here, I want to pass in a new custom button that I created. It's called Cheetah Button. So Cheetah Button. And I want to actually create a button to pass data back from this new screen. And we'll come to that later. But for this, I want the title to be pass data back. And then this also takes in a function. So like, if you don't know what this does, let's peek in here real quick. And you can see that I created a raised button with a border and some styling for the text and the actual border color. So that's what these are here. These are cheetah buttons here. Okay, so we pass in the text and the function. So let's pass in our function. For now, I'm just going to put an empty function in here. Okay, so we have our column here with text, size box, and cheetah button. So now I want to navigate from this screen here, this hub screen, to this navigation test. So all these buttons will go to the same screen unless I am testing something else. Okay, so let's go back to our hub. And now I want to write some code to actually do a normal navigation to our new screen. So a normal navigation will just be a get dot to, and then I'm going to pass in the actual screen directly. So I'm going to say navigation test. Okay, and we also have to add that to our main. So let's go back to the main file here, and I'm going to add a new get page. So get page and say name. Let's call that navigation test, and I want to pass in the actual page. So we can say this navigation hub. We don't need that for the first button, but for the second one we will. So I'm creating that now. So let's go back to the navigation hub. So let's test this out. So let's restart. And now let's go to our navigation hub. Click on this. And you can see we have our navigation test and pass data back button here. Let's add some padding to this screen too. So let's go back here and let's add some padding to our container. So let's do padding, edge instance all, and let's do 16. Okay, that looks better. So let's go back to our hub. And now I want to actually do a named navigation to the screen. So let's go back to the hub code, and we will do the same thing that we did on the previous screen. So we'll say get.to named, and we'll pass in the actual named screen. So that's navigation test. Okay, and reload. And now you can see that, oops, I actually put the wrong name in here. So let's go back to our main. So yeah, be careful if you're copying and pasting code like this. So let's do navigation test, reload. And now you see we go to our test screen here. Okay, so let's go to the next button. So the first two are pretty easy, pretty simple. You have a normal navigation and you have a named navigation using a named route. Now let's actually see how to pass parameters to your routes. So first I'm going to show you a way that you've seen on the web. So let's go down here to our third button, and I'm going to say get dot to named. And for this, we're going to have the same navigation test. So I'm going to copy and paste this line here. But now I want to pass in more information. So GetX is very good at knowing how to parse the syntax that you would normally use on the web, for example. So let's put a complicated URL in here. So let's do navigation test, and then you would say question mark to say that you want additional parameters after that. So we have question mark, and then I'm going to say first. So I'm going to pass in my first name here, so Julian. Then I'm going to pass in another one and just say Curry. Oops, not Curry, but we'll pass in second here, and then that'll be Curry. So this will be and second equals Curry. Okay, so we're going to the navigation test screen, and we're passing the first name and second name as URL parameters. If you're using Flutter for web, you might actually do something like this too. So this is a good way to reuse code across the mobile platform and the web platform. Okay. So the good thing about doing this too is that you don't have to actually define a new get page here. So GetX is actually pretty smart about parsing that for you. So let's go back to the navigation hub and we can save this. Okay, so now let's actually go to the test screen and we can actually parse out these first and second names here. So let's go to the navigation test. And now I want to create a couple of variables for our parameters. So I want to say string first name, and I want that equal to get. So get actually has some nice static variables built into it. So we can say get parameters. So parameters are the parameters that are entered after the question mark here, like so. So we can say get.parameters, and we can take the first, and then we could do string, oops, I misspelled that. So let's do name, and then we can do last name equals get.parameters, and we will do second. Okay. So I should probably also make these final. It's giving me that warning. So final and final. Okay, so now let's go back to our hub and we will restart. So let's look at the navigation. So now on button 3, we have our parameter. So we should see that first name being printed out here. So let's click on the third button. And now you can see we have Julian here. So let's actually print out that name in the app bar up here. So let's go back to our test. So you might actually do this in your app. So you can say first name up here in your app bar. And for this, we will create a condition here. So we're gonna use a null operator for Dart. If you're not familiar with null operators, that's okay. It's not really a big deal, but I'm gonna say first name, and then I'm gonna say if first name is null, then print the first name, else print the navigation test. So that's what this operator does. So let's save, reload. You can see we have Julian here. Okay, and if we go back, we still get that here. Okay, so for the next button here, I'm going to show you how to pass named parameters to your screen. So let's go back to our main, and I'm going to create a new get page here. Copy, paste. So I still want to navigate to a navigation test, but now I want to put a actual named parameter in this get page widget. So to do that, it's actually pretty easy. You say slash, and then you would say colon, and then your actual named parameter. So I'm going to say colon title. So let's go back to our hub. And doing this is actually pretty similar to the named navigation up here. So let's go up here and I'm going to copy and paste this here. And now I'm going to put in a slash and then our title name. So I'm going to put in Cheetah Coding. Okay. And I put that in the wrong spot. So let's copy. So that should actually be the fourth button here. Yeah, down here. Okay, so save. And now let's go to our test screen and let's get that title. So I'm going to say final string title. And you would actually do it the same way. So we say get.parameters. Now instead of second, I'm going to get our title. So title. And then I'm going to put that instead of our text here. So if we have a title, I'm going to show that. Else I'm going to show navigation test here. So let's save and reload. Let's go back to our fourth button here. And now you can see we have Cheetah Coding here. And you can see we're not passing in our first name. So our first name is null. And we show navigation test here. So these are two great methods to pass data from one screen to the next screen. And the thing that's great about it is that it follows the same syntax that you would use for web navigation. So let's go back to the hub and let's work on popping the current stack. So that's actually pretty easy. Let's go to the navigation hub. And doing this is pretty trivial. So let's go down here and let's say get dot. So we have a few different options here. We have off, off all, off named. So off implies that you will be pushing a new screen, but you'll be popping screens behind that. So one example would be that you have a login screen and you want to push a normal app screen, but you don't want the login screen to be available anymore. So you say off the new screen, and then the user cannot go back to the login screen after they navigate away from it. So let's say get off, and for this I'm going to have it named. So you can have it not be named or named. So let's say off all named. And for this, we're just going to say navigation test. So we're going to push the navigation test screen and we're going to pop, actually let's do off named. So off named here. So you can hover over this and it says pop the current named page in the stack and push a new one in its place. So it says pop the current named page in the stack and push a new one in its place. So that's a better explanation than what I said, but same thing. So off named will pop the current stack, and off all named, so off all named will push all of the previous stacks and push this navigation test screen. Okay, so let's do off named and let's reload. So let's go to our navigation hub and let's go to the fifth button. And you can see we pushed to our navigation test screen. Now let's see what happens when we go back. You see that we went back to the home screen. So we skipped over the hub screen because we popped it off the stack. So off name is a great way to actually get rid of the current screen. So let's go to the next button. We have navigate and pop until. I wanted to show you how to push a new screen and pop the previous screens until a certain condition is met. So that's what this button will be for. So let's go down here to the button and I'm going to say get dot off named until. So until implies that there's a condition. So it'll be a predicate, and a predicate is just a function that returns either true or false. So we push the given named page and then pop the stack until the predicate returns true. So until this new function returns true that you define here. So off named until, and I'm going to say page will be navigation test. And then for this condition here, it takes in a route object here. And then you can actually define what you want to do for this here. So let's see what happens if we keep this condition as false. So let's save. And now let's push this button, navigate and pop until. And I messed up because I did not name that correctly. So I'm just going to copy and paste this here. Reload. Now let's click on that button. And you can see that we've gone to the navigation test screen and the back button is gone. And that's because we're at the top of the stack now. So we've removed the previous two screens. So we cannot go back to the hub screen or the home screen. So those are all gone. So returning false here implies that you want to pop all the previous screens. So let's say that you want to pop all screens in your stack until you go back to the first screen. Doing that is actually pretty easy. You have our route here. And with this route object, you have a few different options. You have a few conditions here. You have is active, is current, is first. So I'm going to say is first. So this line here implies that we'll push this screen here and we will pop all previous screens until we hit the first screen. So for this app, it'll behave the same as this previous button here, but that won't always be the case. That's just because we only have 3 screens in our stack. So let's save. Let's go to the navigate and pop until again. You see we have our button here now. Let's go back. And now we navigate to our first screen. So if we had 4 screens between the home screen and the test screen, it will pop all 4 screens that were between those and it'll take us back to our home screen here. Okay? Navigation in GetX is pretty simple. So let's go to the next button. So now I want to show you how to remove the current route. So let's go down here. And there's a couple different ways to do this. We could say get dot remove route. So remove route removes a defined route that you pass in. So getting the current route is pretty simple. You could say get, and then you have a few different options in here. So you have raw route. So raw route returns the type that we need. So we need to pass in a route with a type here. So I'm going to pass in raw route. So raw route, check a raw current route. So it's the current route that we're passing in here. So let's save. Restart. Let's go back to our buttons. We'll push this one. And now we go back to our home screen. But be careful with this one because we're still in the same stack now. So if we press the navigation button, then we actually cannot go back to our hub screen. So that is something that you need to be careful of in your app. Once you remove that route from your screen and you stay in that current route, then that route is gone. You can no longer navigate back to it in the stack. And the way around that for this app that I made here would just be to navigate to a different screen and then go back to it like this. But I just want to show you a very basic way of passing in the current route here. There's a couple other ways to do the same thing too. For example, you can do get dot, I think it's routing dot route. Yeah, and this will pass in the current route too, and it'll behave the same way. Okay, so now let's talk about returning data from the navigation test screen back to the navigation hub screen. So in order to do so, you need to actually navigate to a route asynchronously and then come back to the current route with that data. I will show you what I mean now. So let's go up here and I'm going to create a new function above our build here. So I'm going to say, let's call it handle return data. And this will be a async function. So let's do async. I'm assuming that you know how to use await async in your apps. So this will be asynchronous. And now I want to create a new variable. So I'm going to say var data because I don't know what the data type will be. So var data. Then I'm going to say equals await. So we're going to await a get dot to call. So I'm going to say get dot to and navigation test. And then I want to print the return data. So let's say print data. I'm not going to show it on the screen. I just want to print it to make sure that this is working correctly. This is how you would handle any return data from the next screen. So now let's actually go to this screen. And now I want to actually pass data back in this button here. So doing that is actually pretty easy. We're just going to say get. And I should have mentioned this in the previous button. Like a better way to go back to the previous stack and not have it be removed is to actually say get dot back. And we can pass in a result. So there's a field called result. And for the result, I'm going to pass in a string. So I'm just going to say cheetah coding. Okay, so keep in mind get dot remove. So back here in our previous screen, we said remove route. So this removes the route from the stack, and get dot back just goes back to the previous route without actually removing it from your stack. Very important not to confuse those two things. So we have get dot back, and we return the result back to the previous screen. So let's save and reload. So now let's go to our navigation. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot to do. Let's go back to our hub. And down here, we need to actually pass in that function that we created. So we have handle return data. And we need to put that down here. So I'm just going to replace it here. And let's reload. So let's go back to that button to handle return data. And now let's pass data back. So we go back to the previous screen and we see cheetah coding here. So that's what we expect to have in our hub screen here. So we printed that data here. So you can do whatever you want to do with that return data. You can set your state, you can set a block or provider or your GetX controller, for example. You can call it API or whatever you want to do. But for this video, we're just going to print the data like so. So we've covered the basics of navigation in GetX. But now I want to talk about these three things which are part of navigation too, in a sense. First, let's talk about snack bar. So let's go back to the hub, and I'm going to create a function for our snack bar here. Snack bars are pretty easy in GetX. Replace this empty function with a get dot snack bar. So I'm assuming that you already know what a snack bar is. It's very similar to a toast. So let's do get.snackbar. The options are pretty simple here. You pass in a title or a message, but there's a lot of different options too. So let's go up here. You have all these customizable parts of a snack bar, but we're just going to focus on the text and the message, and maybe a little bit of customization. But let's pass in a title first. So let's do title, and I'm going to say Cheetah Coding, and then for the message, I'm going to say something like, let's say snack bars are easy in GetX. Okay, and that's it. That's the basic snack bar. So let's restart. Go back to navigation and open snack bar. So it looks the same on both Android and iOS, which is nice. Let's add a background color. So background color, let's do colors.white. And that looks a lot better. So we can have no blur now. I think you can put it on the bottom too. Let's see. Yeah, snack bar position. So let's do snack position. Snack position bottom. And reload. And now it's at the bottom of the screen here. Okay, pretty easy. Now let's talk about dialogues. Dialogues are also very easy in GetX. So for that, we say get.dialog. You can start to see a pattern here with these things. For dialog, if you look inside the class, there's not that many options here. We're going to focus on a few that you'll use for sure. I'm actually going to use the default dialog because the default dialog actually has a lot of customization built into it. So let's say get.default dialog. And let's look inside here. So now you have more options. You have the text color, the background color. You can have your callback functions. You can create the actual content itself here inside. You have your button colors, the button radius, for example, or the dialog radius. Yeah, so let's go back and let's add a title. For title, I'm going to put in Cheetah Coding. I want to put some text in here. So for that, there's a field called middle text, a highly customizable dialog. Let's see how this looks. Save and restart. Let's open dialog. This is how it looks by default. Pretty basic. Let's add some customization to it. So let's put a radius of 0. Let's add a confirm and cancel. So for that, there's actually a field called confirm and cancel. So let's say confirm. And this is the widget that you want to put for your confirm. So for that, I want to have a flat button. I want to have a child that says text OK. And I also want to add the onPressed here. So let's do onPressed. And for onPressed, I'm just going to print confirmed. And now I want to have a cancel. So cancel. For this, I want it to be a flat button too. So flat button. And for the child, I want it to say text, cancel. Let's do uppercase, cancel. And for the onPressed here, for this, I want to actually cancel the dialog. So doing that in GetX is actually the same as doing a back navigation in your stack. So we could say get.back. And this needs to be a function. So let's do our lambda. Okay, so when we press the cancel button, we'll go back in the stack, which just means that we cancel the dialog. So let's save and reload. Now let's open this again. And this looks a lot better. We have our cancel and our OK. OK prints confirmed, and cancel dismisses the dialog. And you can add a lot more stuff to this. You can add more widgets. You can add background colors and styling to your default dialog here. I always find that default dialog is enough in your app. You don't really need to use the actual dialog like get.dialog. You can use get.defaultDialog. Okay, so last I want to talk about the bottom sheet. So I'm assuming that you already know what a bottom sheet is. It's a sheet that comes up from the bottom. It comes up and goes down. Doing that is actually really easy too. So let's say get dot bottom sheet is what you would use here. And then you can pass in the widget that you want to use. So it takes in a widget for the bottom sheet. And then there's a lot more options here. You can go inside here again, and you can see we have many different options. You can change the barrier color, elevation, background color, persistence. You can disable the drag. But the main thing we want to focus on is the widget here, the actual content. Okay, so let's pass in a widget. I'm going to pass in a container. And for the container, I'm going to have a child. So for child, in the example in the docs, they use a wrap. So they say wrap here. And a wrap takes in children, like a column. So instead of column, they use wrap. You'll see why they use wrap in a second. Wrap makes sure that the content inside is only as wide or tall as the content requires. I will talk about that more in a second. So let's create our children here. I'm going to create a few different list tiles. So I'm going to say list tile, and let's do a title. For title, I'm going to say recipes, and then we'll pass in a on tap. And for on tap, I'm going to have a empty function, and this should be a text. Okay, let's create two more of these just because. Paste, and down here I'm going to say people, I guess, and places. So let's save and reload. Now let's press our bottom sheet button. And you can see we have our recipes, people, and places, but it looks pretty bad because it's transparent. So to fix that, we just go down here, and first let's put that on a different line. And down here, inside of our bottom sheet, I'm going to set the background color to colors dot white. Reload. And that looks a lot better. So you can put whatever you want to in here. It can be like a grid, it can be a list view, images and icons, whatever you want to in here. So let's see what happens if we don't have wrap here. Let's put a column here instead. So let's do column and let's reload. And then let's open our bottom sheet again. And now you can see that it takes up more space. That's something that you just need to be aware of. Don't use columns, use a wrap. And if you want to know why, go inside the bottom sheet and you can look at the code. But yeah, just use wrap here. So we have our wrap. And if you don't know what wrap does, you can look at wrap 2. It places children in one line and gives control over their alignment and spacing. So that covers the actual content for the video, but I want to show you a couple more options for your navigation. Let's go back to our main real quick. And instead of our get page, we have different options. So let's go to our get page here. And you can see we have bindings, which I might talk about in a different video. That could be a whole different topic by itself, actually. You can say full screen dialogues here, for example. You can have different gestures. You can set your curve here. So a curve defines your animation in and out for different screens. I'm going to define different transitions because that's something that you can easily see in this video. So let's go back to our main, and down here, I'm going to pass in a few different transitions. So I'm going to say transition, and then you have different options here. So let's do left to right here. And down here, transition, let's do transition, let's do zoom. Let's do one for this get page. Let's do transition. Let's do the down to up. Yeah. Reload. Now let's go to our navigation hub. And you can see we went from left to right. So again, left to right. The cool thing about that too is that if you navigate back to the previous screen, then it also does the same transition. So it goes from right to left. And then let's test this other one. Let's go back to our screen here. Let's go to normal navigation. Keep in mind, this doesn't work with the normal navigation if you define the route directly. You can see here. But if you do a named navigation, then you can actually see the transition zoom. So you can see the zoom here. Zoom in, zoom out. So depending on where you define your transitions, then you need to be careful about named versus non-named routes. Let's test this one too. So I think that's the fourth button. So this should be down to up. We have down to up, up to down. This is how you would define different transitions in GetX. Very, very, very easy. I really love GetX a lot. So yeah, that's all I wanted to do for this series now. I cover state management, dependency injection, which is part of state management also in part 1 and part 2. And I cover navigation. So those three concepts are the most important parts of GetX. The other things are pretty easy. I might do another video on GetX utilities. I'm not really sure yet. I'm not really sure if it's worth actually doing an entire video on those, but we'll see. I really hope this helps you out with your GetX journey. Stay tuned for the next video and happy coding. Bye.